Hi everyone, this is Jim. Welcome to this postmortem of my Blitz game number 757. I started off with e4, my opponent went e5. I go knight f3, he goes knight c6, and I go bishop b5, the Ruy Lopez, and one of the most classical of all the openings. And my opponent goes for the main line here, so a nice opportunity to take a look at the main line of the Ruy Lopez. So he plays a6, kicks the bishop back, and then goes knight f6, attacking the e-pawn, which oddly enough white doesn't bother to defend. White just castles, and black can take it. Knight takes e4, you see, is a second choice here, but that's a different line, and white gets either gets the pawn back or he gets enough compensation for the pawn. So black players these days don't usually take, although it's still a playable line. But go bishop b7. Now white defends. b5, kicking the bishop back, and castling. So castling is the first point of divergence from the main line. What castling does is it introduces the idea of the Marshall Gambit, which is a pretty interesting way for black to play. So castles, and now if I continue with the main line of c3 here, then d5 is the Marshall Gambit. d6 is a way of saying, oh, sorry, I didn't mean it. I really want to play the main line. But d5 is the Marshall Gambit. And white normally takes, black takes, and then the e-pawn is hanging. And white can just grab that. So it is a free pawn, a center pawn, but black has some interesting compensation here. There's different ways to play from this point, actually. Knight f6 is the original Marshall Gambit, the way that Frank Marshall played it. Bishop b7, I haven't seen that, but it looks like that's a playable move as well. Or c6 is the main way it's played, and then white follows up with moving the d-pawn either to d3 or to d4. So if we look at this position, you can see that black is pretty well set to bring his pieces out to the king side. They're both looking over here. And so he's got a very dangerous king side initiative, and also this bishop often goes here to chase the rook away and get on this other diagonal. So he's got three diagonals covered over here on the king side, whereas white's pieces are actually locked in by these pawns at the moment. Well, the d-pawn is going to move, but it takes white a while to untangle, and white actually has to play very carefully to maintain any kind of advantage. And in many lines, black gets at least enough of an attack to draw, and of course if white isn't careful, he can convert that to a win as well. So it's an interesting way to play, but as a practical matter, I prefer to avoid the Marshall Gambit. I've played this h3 move here. I've also played d3, but I wanted to try a4 this time, another anti-Marshall kind of move. Basically, you're keeping the c3 square open for the knight to come out and trying to stir up some trouble on the queen side to keep black busy. So he pushed on with b4. That's one of the main responses there. And I went with d3. So now I've got a line open for my bishop at least, and d6 is the normal way it continues from here. My opponent, though, had different ideas. Basically, he's delaying the move. He's avoiding moving that d-pawn until a time when he can play d5 in a single move. So he's trying to save a tempo, and this h6 move is useful anyway. It keeps me from bringing pieces to the g5 square. And I followed suit with h3, also a generally useful move, and keeping some advantage to white. But looking at this bishop d5 move is actually quite interesting. The thing is, which I didn't realize, the thing about this move is he can't take it so easily. If he does take it, I'll take back with a pawn, chase this knight away, and then the e-pawn is hanging once again. So I can actually win a pawn, and in more favorable circumstances if he takes the bishop. So the bishop gets to stay there. He shouldn't take it, but should find some other developing move. Probably, actually, bishop d6 was one suggestion, because there is already pressure on that e-pawn. So that would be interesting. But, well, like I said, I didn't see that. So I played the move h3. So we're out of the opening book at this point. And he went a5. So I think this is the first move I would criticize a little bit. It wasn't really necessary to move that pawn forward. I mean, he's avoiding moving his d-pawn when, say, d6 would probably be the most natural move there. and he's defending a pawn that doesn't really need defending just yet. It could also have been defended more actively with rook to b8. And it also gives up control of the b5 square, which maybe my bishop might like to go there at some point. So all in all, that's not the best move here. I mean, it's not a terrible mistake. Nothing horrible happens, but it's not black is not making the most of his position there. So now he goes d5 in one go. That was his idea. I take, he takes, and now the chess engine says, well, I should just drop my bishop back to c1, and you know, that's kind of a funny move, but it's very in keeping with the white's play in the Ruy Lopez. You often want to keep these bishops back over here, kind of lurking in a way. They're way back in white's camp, but they're looking all the way across the board at squares over in black's camp as well. So it is an interesting way to play. I didn't really think about that. I was thinking more. I wanted to get active with my pieces, so I developed my knight, allow him to take off my bishop. But, well, he gets a little activity too here, so this didn't work out as well as I had hoped. And with bishop b7, that's probably how he should continue. He's probably got at least an equal position, maybe even better if he can do something with the advantage of the two bishops. But he went queen f6 here instead, and that walks into this knight e4 move. So that's kind of a tempo-wasting move. This is a fork, hits the loose bishop over here, hits the queen. So the queen has to drop back to defend. And now you know, the chess engine wants me to trade and put my rook back on e3 where it came from. Kind of a funny idea, but this is a good square for that rook. It can look across to the f3 and the g3 squares and maybe look to put pressure on the king side later after the knight moves. So yeah, interesting position. I had a different idea here. I went with queen e1, lining up on the e file. He went bishop to b6. I mean, this is okay. It just wasn't quite as good as the other line. I go c3 here, looking to undermine his queenside pawns. He went bishop a6. So here's a mistake. This move rook d2. I think this is where my game goes downhill a little bit. It was pretty even up to this point, I think. But after rook d2, he actually has an advantage. Let's see, bishop d5 once again is a good move, and well, this is the kind of thing you should always look for. You know, when your opponent makes a threat, you should look around to see if you have a bigger threat. So he attacks a pawn, I attack a piece, and well, if he has to defend with the bishop, then that takes the pressure off this diagonal. If he defends with the queen, I can trade the knight, and then I can grab this pawn over here, because that takes the queen off of the that pawn. Well, I don't know. There's still some issues there, but anyway, I would have to work that out. But in any case, it's a better move than the move I played, rook to d2. So what happens here is it just allows black to get some initiative, piling up on that pawn. And then let's see, he plays king h8. He's planning to push the f pawn forward to kick my knight around, and I decided to push forward with the d pawn. So it was a combination of rook d2 and d4. This actually loses a pawn. And let's see, he starts out okay here. He takes, and then he plays f5, which I guess he'd been thinking about playing for a while, but that's not the most accurate continuation. The real way to take advantage of this, you know, I've got this isolated pawn here that's under fire, and he can win that pawn by first pressurizing the e file here. He's hitting this knight, and if I move the knight away, then the trades on the e file will remove some defenders from the d pawn here, so I will get in trouble that way. Let's see, the best try according to the chess engine is knight e5, and well, this still allows him to win the pawn. He can just grab it, although well, the chess engine wants to play rook c8, avoiding all trades, and there's still no way I can save that pawn. So he could have won a center pawn there. Let's see, he went f5, so this lets me off the hook here. I bring my knight into c5 as a way of shielding the pawn from the bishop, and let's see, he trades queens and takes the knight off. It's I guess his bishop had nothing better to do, so But this leads to a position which is about even if he were to continue trading. This is the best line according to the chess engine. Rook to d8 and rook to e6. And yeah, you can see it's a even distribution of pieces and pawns. And we even have the same colored bishops, so no side has really any advantage in this position. He kept things a little more interesting by going bishop b7. I went bishop d5, and let's see, went bishop back to a8. And then I just took here. The chess engine says it's best, and I have to agree. If you look at the result, just keep piling up the pressure on that knight. Let's see, and it gives this tricky line. You know, the knight could move. Yeah, I guess the problem is the knight doesn't want to go back to a7. Other squares, yeah, the knight just does not have many good squares. I guess that's the problem. So anyway, it gives this tricky line with knight d4. So your opponent, first of all, would have to find that line. So it's interesting to just kind of keep the pressure up that way and see if your opponent can find these resources. Let's see. And so that is losing the knight, but, well, he's gaining the bishop because it's a discovered attack on the bishop. But now my rook gets active. And if we compare this position to what happens in the game, I get this same distribution of pieces with the knight versus the bishop in the endgame, but my rooks are much more active compared to what happened in the game. So this is definitely a better way to play. I went and took immediately. Let's see, he took back, and I traded rooks and went for this knight versus bishop endgame. But you can see the difference is my pieces are back here rather than being active and attacking his pieces. So this is probably even, although it's still a little bit tricky to play. I mean, I saw these ideas with the knight, and I was attracted to this continuation. And in fact, his very next move, he goes astray. You know, there's this threat, and the knight's coming in here to f7 to fork the king and the rook, so he doesn't have time to grab my pawn. And there's two ways for the bishop to defend that square. He can defend it here or here. And the right answer is bishop e8, although it's a little strange, but it defends a square. I mean, the bishop has retreated, and now I have to find another move here, but it's all probably in the range of about even. But after bishop d5, I have the pin, and it's actually lost. The game is lost at this point. So let's look first at what happened in the game. He went king g8, I went knight c6, and you know, obviously if he takes the knight, I'll take the rook, so that's exchange up in the endgame. That's an easy win. And at the same time, I'm threatening this fork, and I'm hitting his rook. So rook d7 was the only attempt. Actually, during the live commentary, I was thinking he could move his king again. I was just forgetting his rook is hanging. So that does not work. So rook d7, and then I have this tactic where I trade the rook for the bishop, and then I go for the fork. So anyway, after I took the bishop, he resigned, so that was the end of the game. But nicely, going back to this point where he played bishop d5, I pinned. The best move here for black is king to g8. And after this, it's funny, but it's a kind of a zugzwang position here. It seems like every move he makes kind of weakens his position at this point. So I just hold the rook on the d file so that his bishop can't move. Any move by the bishop results in a loss of the rook. His rook can't move because the knight covers that square, the pawn covers that square, and the other move loses the bishop. The king can't move. It can't move there legally. If it goes there, it's a fork. And once again, if bishop takes knight, rook takes rook. And if the king goes to g8, we get the same thing as happened in the game. I just play knight c6, and we get that same position. So so he has no good move. The only pieces he can move without losing immediate material, well, it seems he loses material no matter what, but the only moves we haven't eliminated yet are the pawn moves. So if he moves this pawn, I can just take it with knight takes c6. If he moves this pawn or this pawn, you know, I can start gobbling up those weak pawns. If he tries something like this, then knight to c6 will win at least the a pawn over here. So let's see, the line given is this rook d7, Knight takes a5. Because he wanted to move the rook and still hold on to the bishop. And then bishop e6, and then knight back to c6. And I'm a pawn up in the endgame, and I should go on to win. So anyway, that's after that bishop d5 move. That was the fatal mistake. So let's just go forward to the final position. Let's see, king g8, knight c6, rook d7, rook takes d5. And that's how the game ended. So anyway, interesting game. Hope you guys enjoyed it, and I will see you again soon. Bye.